Welcome to the Startup Grind.
With that having been said, I'd like to introduce Michelle Boucher. Michelle, take a bow. Michelle and I have known one another for a couple of years. She is actively involved in the Maryland Center for Entrepreneurship and the Howard Tech Council. And I would now like to introduce our featured fireside chat guest. And that is none other than Miss Danielle Tate, founder, CEO of Mrs.com. She's best-selling author. She's a columnist in a number of major publications. Please come on up. Have at it.
Thank you. I have a feeling that the gentleman will get a lot out of this as well. I've had a chance to meet Danielle over the phone, and if we had a bottle of wine, we'd probably still be talking. So she's amazing. Can I really quickly try something out on you guys, and I want your honest opinion, and I'm sorry to usurp this for 1 second. So being that it's Women's Month, right? I feel since I'm a woman, I can do this. I actually am launching a new business, and I wanted to just read my value proposition and get yay or nay. Is that okay? Do you mind? Okay, and if it stinks, don't say anything. So the name of the company is Business Breakthrough Blueprints, and I help solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and small business owners reach their next level revenue goals using a solid, proven 6-week, step-by-step program designed to eliminate analysis paralysis and help double revenues in 6 months or less. Okay, thumbs up or thumbs down? Thumbs up? No thumb, is there a thumbs down? You just hear a thumb sideways? Okay, cool. If you're not a thumbs up, I would really love to hear why after. Now, let me get to Danielle. Thank you for affording me that moment. I just, you don't get chances to talk to people very often. Let me talk about Danielle. First, I'm going to read you her bio, whether you like it or not, so that you know who you're dealing with here. So Danielle, across a decade of her career as an entrepreneur, she learned how to transform good ideas into successful businesses. And at age 25, she bootstrapped Mrs.com and grew it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. As a young female founder, she noticed that a few business guides offered step-by-step advice to smart but inexperienced women. And so Elegant Entrepreneurs, which is her new book, which I hope you brought a copy of. Oh, good, yes, we're going to hold it up and pitch for you later. Which she just wrote, draws on her experience and conversations with prominent entrepreneurs and top executives. She not only shows in straightforward and easily accessible terms how one can transform a rough concept into a lucrative business, she also gives readers a privileged peek into the entrepreneur lifestyle that allows business owners to take charge of their lives. Relevant both to women with no business background and those in the process of developing a business, Elegant Entrepreneur offers key information and concepts from idea to exit. Taitt, they call you Taitt. Danielle navigates complex business terrain with clarity, insight, and yes, elegance, as you can see how she's dressed. Readers are given the chance to see if entrepreneurship is right for them and stand to gain freedom, flexibility, and job satisfaction that comes with founding and running one's own business. So thank you for the amazing book you've written, but let's get into the meat of who you are, how you got here, and all the juicy stories that I heard. Okay, so why don't you just start by explaining what is Miss Now, Mrs. and what made you transition into starting that business at 25 years old?
Sure. So, anytime you see someone sitting up here, you always assume, this was the end goal. They went to Wharton, they went to Harvard, they were going to be an entrepreneur. And so I wanted to clarify very quickly that I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I have a bachelor's in biology. My last coding class was in middle school. It was DOS. And yet I run a tech company. So I say that to clear the air a little bit. The book is called Elegant Entrepreneur, not because I'm overly elegant, but that it's a simple solution to a problem. And the problem I saw was not enough smart women with business ideas were brave enough to start those businesses and to scale them past the $1 million mark. And so as an entrepreneur, and a problem solver, I had to solve the problem, and that's where the book came from. So how I ended up being an accidental entrepreneur, I was the #1 sales rep for a Fortune 500 company. I was telling somebody earlier, I drove 1,300 miles a week, calling on various hospitals in the area. I was very, very good at my job. I was saving people from cancer, pulling in 6-figure salary at the ripe age of 23. And eventually I met this amazing man, got married, and decided to take a day off work to change my name. And super crazy, organized, driven person. So I had all of my forms, everything was paper clipped, I had my order, I had my MapQuest, because this was well before GPS or Waze. So I went to get my driver's license. And it took not one, not two, but 3 trips just to get my name on a piece of plastic. And I was so frustrated. I had burned an entire day of vacation time accomplishing almost nothing. And so I stormed home to my brand new husband, was like, there should be some sort of service like TurboTax for name change. I would pay any amount of money to just not do this. And my husband is a very wise and thoughtful man, and looked at me and said, well, you should do that. And so, unlike the movies, unlike all the TV shows, I didn't just quit my job. I spent almost a year dual tracking, so working 60 plus hours a week, and then evenings, weekends, and on fun holidays, bootstrapping and understanding and researching what became Miss Now Misses, which, if you haven't figured out from the problem, is an online name change service for brides. So we condense 13 hours of the name change paperwork for your Social Security, your passport, your driver's license, down to your banks, credit cards, gym memberships, into 30 minutes for $30. And so that is how I started into entrepreneurship.
Well, so behind every good, successful woman, there's definitely, sometimes, a good man.
Definitely sometimes.
Definitely sometimes.
Or another woman.
Or another woman.
Or a tribe of women behind her.
You got it. It's never just you, right? So who were some of your early, was there anybody that like inspired you early on, either mentor or somebody that helped you with all of this?
No, I did a really bad job finding mentors. The one person I could think of at that time in tech and in wedding tech was Carly Roney, the co-founder of The Knot, which is a very large wedding planning platform. And so as a brand new entrepreneur, of course, I like weaseled my way through and got her email address and was like, oh, Carly, will you be my mentor? The answer was no. And so having not made that happen, I wasn't that discouraged. I was busy doing my thing, and entrepreneurship world wasn't as female friendly back in '05. There weren't as many women, and so I sort of built my software company and small family very quietly in a corner. And it wasn't until writing this book that I plugged into this amazing network that has flourished and grown since then. So I looked up to Martha Stewart. I read the Martha Rules. That was my first business book. Sort of followed her footsteps to become a mogul. Not there yet. But I would encourage everyone to not do what I did and find mentors a lot sooner.
Okay. So how did you come up, why did you go from a successful .com and seemingly still successful and growing to, what made you transition to becoming an author? Why wouldn't you just stay there and just grow that to its fullest potential, or maybe you did, I don't know. But so tell us about the genesis of it.
Yeah, I think most people, including my family, had that question. To be a CEO and run a company and grow 30% annually takes a lot of dedication.
And have 3 children.
1.
Oh, sorry, 1.
Feels like
Like
3.
Been talking
Still
about
more.
my
Still more. There's 2 future ones. But yeah.
I don't think I can balance it all after that. There are decisions you make. So anyway, a decade into running a no longer startup but a larger company, to be frank, I got bored. That's not the answer you want to hear. But while it was growing and I enjoy it, and I still have new ideas and we still make new partnerships, and brides, my challenge is every year I get older and brides stay the same age. So making sure we're on the technology that they're using and talking to them the way they want to be spoken to via text is a struggle and something that we're always working on. But I had this moment where I hit 30 and was like, is this it? like that sounds incredibly terrible. Like I have this great life and I've worked hard for it, but I was like, did I just do it too fast? Like, was I a child bride and like started a company at 25 and now I'm here and I'm successful, but there I need something else.
Mhm.
And so after founding a Pilates studio, I ended up writing a book.
Oh, oops, you left that out of our conversation. Okay, so just shove that in there in the corner there. Pilates studio.
Brick
onto
and
the
mortar.
next
I've
thing.
done digital. It's
Yeah.
interesting to try to do something tangible day to day. It's much harder than I expected.
Now, when you did the Pilates studio, tell us a little bit about how that came about, and was that by yourself, or do you have other people involved, or?
That was a mistake. Again, for being a little bit bored, my longtime Pilates instructor was fired, and I made an emotional decision quickly. I said, I'll help you start your own studio without really thinking about the ramifications. And so, while I had known this person for 8 years, I didn't know them as a business partner. And I learned a lot, grew a lot, and eventually did a buyout to no longer be involved in that particular company. So, you don't always get all of them right, you always learn. And I learned a lot about the importance of partnership dynamics and understanding what success means for both partners and what moral ethics are for each of you and making sure that those align. Because if they don't, no matter how great the idea, no matter how great the product or the studio or the community that you build, you're not going to be happy. You're going to cringe when the phone rings. Like anytime you get a text, you're hoping your phone isn't your partner, and that's not how you want to be living your life. I would rather be bored than do that again.
Can anyone relate to that? Partnerships? I absolutely can, I know. Wendy's like, no!
Partnerships are like a marriage, and sometimes they're harder to get out of. So think about that. If you
My
haven't-
business divorce was worse than my real divorce.
I have heard that.
Oh, yeah.
Second business might be Mrs. to Ms.
I have get your name back on the flip side.
I think she's actually 2 steps ahead of you on that, because,
Where were you 15 years ago?
Not yet, yeah, that was too soon.
so you talk about mirror markets, bringing up her point.
So yeah, I don't know if I've coined the term, but I haven't heard anyone else talk about it. In growing a business, you have your first couple of years of just being profitable and growing and scaling and strategic partnerships, land grab, and you're there, and then you're ready for your next series of growth, and you look at where's this coming from? How am I going to make my numbers, and how are they going to be big? And so, in looking at Miss Now Misses, we're an online name change service. We take answer a few questions, we'll ask you to be more specific, and then the software pulls all of the appropriate federal and state paperwork. And so it's actually customer source. I had a number of women, when I was still doing customer support, write in, hey, can you take me from Mrs. back to Miss? Like, sure, just, flip-flop when we say married name, put your maiden name, and, don't mind all of the cakes and champagne glasses, sorry. Really not thoughtful.
She might be celebrating.
I mean,
You
it
never
could
know.
be, but not so thoughtful. So, good story. My husband came home from a business trip, and I had Divorce for Dummies propped up on and like glass of wine, like sitting on the couch. And I wish I had a picture of his face. He was like, "Do we?" I was like, "Yes, but not about what you're thinking." I just wanted to make sure the process was the same in reverse, and it was. So, finding the mirror market. What do you already have that's already built that could be repurposed or very slightly tweaked for a different audience? And so in that same vein, then we also did Name Change Next Step for adoptions, people whose parents were cruel to them when they named them, and prior to legislation, same-sex marriages. So finding these different markets of people who needed the same documents processed with very little difference was one of the keys to us being so profitable.
That's what's called finding the niche, right? You find that niche market and you own it. You blow it up and you own it. Right.
And there's something to be said about niche. You hear niche market, and usually when you're reading about it, it's big. If you have a very small market, if you have only 100 people that could possibly buy what you're selling, it better be really expensive. And at $29.95 or $69.95, that's not something that I could pay my mortgage with. So my niche market is 88% of 2.3 million women every year. So I'm bad at math. I don't know exactly what that number is, but it's a huge renewable niche market. It's not a static market.
But that's a very key point, that your market is large enough to support you and 100 other people that are going to do what you do either before you or after you. And in your case, you had the experience of somebody actually stealing your business. Tell us what happened.
Another fun Danielle story. So a lot of entrepreneurs I talk to are really worried about talking about their business idea before it gets off the ground. In my personal opinion, a business is not worth anything until it's profitable. So by talking to people, by doing, consumer analysis, by understanding what the flaws are before you start, I think you're helping yourself.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I couldn't hear.
Oh, sure. So what I was saying is, in the early days when you just have your idea, when it's hatched and you're super excited about it, a lot of people just want to hide that idea until they have it. Oh, well, when I have my first 1,000 customers, or when I've incorporated, I'll finally talk to people. The sooner you start talking to people, the sooner you're going to find the flaws and the fixes. And if you can do that before you invest a lot of money, you're a lot further ahead. So at the beginning of having an idea, I think you should talk to people about it. But as you start to incorporate and as you put together a website or build your product, you need to really think about terms of use and protecting whatever, identify the special sauce. Like, what is the thing you have that's different? What's the thing that makes your business thrive that somebody else might want to borrow? And so the story you're alluding to, I had a series of copycat competitors, I believe 7. So I'm this nice Methodist girl from Pennsylvania. I start my company. We're profitable from month 1. And I just thought this was it. Like, you just go and you build and you grow. And I had no idea that all of these different people would be like, gee, that's successful. Why don't I do the same thing? And instead of doing the research and building it myself, why don't I just log in and borrow all of it? And so year 2 of Miss Not Misses, I was faced with a competitor. I'm still not legally allowed to say what their name was, but they stole my logo. They logged in 717 times. Thankfully, our database tracks that. And then what made me the most upset was they stole my story.
Oh my God.
They said, oh, we're this couple who got married and there was nothing to help us, and so we made this great service.
They literally cloned you.
And I had been waiting to get to a certain size because I was afraid. And so I hadn't gone to the media yet. And so they scooped me on my own story. And I was mad. But I'm also a pretty level-headed businesswoman. And so I had 2 choices. I could choose to try to outmarket them. And I already had a lot of strategic partners, try to lock up the market and slowly squish them, or sue them. And after a lot of deliberation, we were too young to squish them. I needed more time with a monopoly to really get brand awareness and to really, this all of a sudden gave me the bravery to knock on the bigger doors I had been avoiding for partnerships. And so hundreds of thousands of dollars later, most of the revenue of Miss Now Misses that should have gone to growth went into lawsuits. I wrote some personal checks as well. I ended up 8 months pregnant, sitting in federal court on a witness stand. And I just remember sitting there, I'm not a sweaty person, just cold sweat just running down my back. And I was scared for my unborn baby, that I was hurting him with all of this stress and pressure. And on the flip side, I was really scared for my first baby, my company, that, in about an hour, I would know whether, all of this time and money and effort had been wasted. And so fortunately, court ruled in my favor, and that company had 2 cease and desist. So the moral of the story is use terms of use. So anybody using your product, your service, your website says, yes, I will use this, but I will not create a derivative work. If you need a really good one, if you're starting out, just borrow mine from Miss Now Misses. You're welcome to. I paid enough for it.
That's the part she won't take you to court for copy.
Take it. It's really good, too.
But in the fine print of all those terms of use that we sign, every time we try to use something, you have to click on it. You have no choice, and nobody reads it, right? So I guess that's the easiest way to protect yourself, is you put anything you want in there, and people will agree to it just so that they can use your product.
It's worth the investment, understanding what is most important to your business and safeguarding it as much as you can.
So why do women, just getting back to the book for a moment, why do women need their own guide? What makes a female founder different than a male founder? What kind of characteristics?
So I think we are different, just like men and women are different. We have lots of similarities and things that we're good at and bad at, and when you generalize, you always get in trouble. So I'm going to generalize. I think women entrepreneurs look before they leap, and that's usually a good thing. But you know, there's the glass ceiling in corporate America that's shattering, and entrepreneurship, I say there's the sticky floor. Women tend to find every single reason why they shouldn't start a company, but someone else would be better, or someone's more educated, and they don't start. But when they do, I mean, all of the statistics are in our favor. What is it? You know, we have 30% higher return on investment than if it's a male-led company from a venture capital point of view. So writing a book that addressed some of those hesitancies, and also, I think one of the other things that makes us amazing entrepreneurs is the fact that we are nurturers. Most of us, you know, have the capacity to be a mother. And any mother I know would do anything to keep her child alive. Anything. So when you have a woman entrepreneur, her company is her baby, it's going to be successful because we just won't let it die. There's that level of connection. So serving the different brain and some of the different challenges and different strengths was something that I thought was really important. I looked for it. I read lots and lots of books to self-educate, but I never read one that was for a smart woman with a business idea without an MBA. And sometimes that could be intimidating.
You, switching gears for a minute, how many people know about the Goldman Sachs 10K? Just a few people?
10,000
Okay.
women?
Yes. Would you explain what that is? You participated in it with a couple other folks that I know, and that was quite an adventure. And you actually had some interesting things happen through that. But just tell everybody what that was and what you went through.
Sure. I was not part of the founding committee of the 10,000 Women Venture. I can give you sort of broad strokes. What Goldman Sachs saw was that women entrepreneurs are the revenue generators of the future. And when you invest in women entrepreneurs, especially in emerging economies, those women give between 93 and 97% of their profit back into healthcare, their communities, and their children's education. On the flip side, gentlemen, although we love them, 67% in the same countries with the same investment. So Goldman Sachs realized if we can bring women entrepreneurs from all of these different communities around the globe and put them together to learn from each other, to train them, then in fact we have bettered the world. And so I had the great opportunity to be part of roundtable discussions for the Goldman Sachs meeting in 10,000 Women meeting in DC. And it was really cool, although I have to admit I was really upset that when we got there they handed out topics for your table and I was ready for litigation, IP, like all of these like meaty
Serious
topics,
things.
and they gave me work-life balance. I was like, are you serious? But it turned out a blessing in disguise because all of the women around this table were from vastly different communities, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, all over. And when you first put us together, we were all very, very different. But in talking, all of us were wives, most of us were mothers, all of us were entrepreneurs. And so in talking about the challenges and systems we use, we realized that while we looked really different, we were incredibly similar. And it was incredibly inspiring. Like one of the ladies at my table had been thrown in prison because she was a woman running a business, like all of these different things, and she was just still in there fighting. And so it made any of my tribulations as an entrepreneur seem very, very small. So it just gave me this all of a sudden worldview for women entrepreneurs.
That's something that's kind of rare. Has anybody ever experienced anything like that? I mean, I certainly haven't. That's very unique. And I'm sure it builds into whatever it is you're going to do going forward. You have that perspective. In fact, you were sharing with me that there was a woman who wanted to be able to get your audiobook.
So yes, so ideas, anytime you do something good comes out of it. And so through this conversation, all of these ladies were like, oh, I had just written my book. Like, we need your book. I was like, oh, it's on Amazon. And I'm like, we don't have Amazon. Oh, okay. I was like, well, you know what? I could just ship, like have the publisher ship a crate to you. Like, we'll work it out. The tax and tariffs, and then the fact that I'm in like a red dress on the cover, uncovered, was not necessarily a piece of literature that would be available to some of these people. And so, entrepreneur brain, I'm like, how do I solve this problem? How do I get the book to women who need it? I don't need to make money, it's how do I get it to them? And so the idea of the audiobook happened. I did a Kickstarter to fund the audiobook. Not because I needed the money, but because I wanted people to know what was going on and what the problem was. And so by creating the audiobook, we were able to then host it in Amazon in the cloud, so anyone with a cell phone could play it and not have to download it. So even if they weren't allowed, or even if they didn't have access to bookstores or to traditional Amazon accounts, they did have access to it. So we ended up doing donations to, I think, 28 different incubators and accelerators around the globe.
Does anyone use Kickstarter? Y'all? Okay, well, I'll save that for another time. So, okay, let's see, what other juicy questions do we have? Okay, we're gonna go down the road of failures, right? So we all have that, right? We all have that. But first I wanna ask you, for those who may be sort of closer to the place where you were when you started Miss Now Mrs., looking back, what are some of the things that you can share that would be helpful to know at that stage rather than so far down the road?
To avoid failure or to just know?
Either avoid failure or to help them accelerate success.
Sure. I think one of the most important things, which is easy to say now, and hopefully is helpful on the front end, is it's okay if your company doesn't make it. Like, that's part of the reason I was okay at leaving my job, this huge sales career that I had built, because it's like, you know what, I don't want to be 80 in a rocking chair and wonder, like, what if I had taken that idea and done something with it? We live in a time where entrepreneurship and innovation is a golden ticket. So if you leave your job and you start something and that something falls apart, gets acquired, or just doesn't quite do what you want it to do, you've learned, you've created this skill set that makes you highly marketable to any size corporation, because everybody wants the idea person, the entrepreneur. And so if I had known now what I know now, I would have been less worried and felt less insane for leaving my job and my security, because I didn't know that I was going to develop this skill set that would have made me highly marketable to all of these other corporations. So knowing that would be awesome. Finding co-founders that complement your weaknesses. If you're both the same, it's going to be really fun, but you're not going to be the ideal combination for a successful company. So understanding, looking in the mirror, this is what I'm good at, this is what I can learn, and this is what's just really hard for me. And finding somebody that has the skill set that's really hard for you and then filters over the other way is, again, something I wish I had known.
You know, you had talked earlier about competition. I just wanted to offer a resource while I'm thinking about it. If you want to see what your competition is doing, you can go to a website called similarweb.com, and you can put in your URL, and all of the same types of companies will come up, and you can see what they do, and you can see where they advertise and what their ads look like and what their pages look like and so on. So you can do a little recon that way. It makes it really simple and free. Okay, before we get to Q&A, I have to ask you to talk about what you did before you got into all that sales when you were going to medical school and where that led.
My big failure. So I sit here as a failed cardiologist. I spent the first 20 plus years of my life intending to be a heart surgeon and doing all of the things that you're supposed to do. Like, I had no spring breaks. I volunteered. I worked at Ohio State Heart and Lung Institute in summer times, in the winter times, anytime I wasn't in school. I did colonoscopy research for the local town doctor when I was home.
So fun.
Yeah, anything I could do to fill in what I was supposed to do. And so not getting into school was my first really, really big failure. And I had two choices. I remember I was about to graduate and I was sitting on my roommate's couch and I was like, you know, I can go home to my tiny little town in Pennsylvania as a failure and like figure it out, or I can just make something work. And I of course chose make something work. and graduating into a recession, there weren't any research positions available, which is what my fallback was. So I put my little resume with all of my scientific research on monster.com and ended up being called by a recruiter and promptly was interviewing for a job selling Canon copiers. And I really needed the job, because if I didn't have the job, I was going to have to move back home. And I could not move back to Bedford, Pennsylvania, where everybody knows you, everybody knows your parents, and everyone knew I didn't get into school. So I'm sitting across the desk from this man, who was very nice. And Steve looked at me and goes through, and he's looking at the resume, and he's looking at me, and he's looking at the copiers, and he was just not
Wasn't coming
connecting.
together for him, yeah.
And he was like, finally, he was just like, he's like, what makes you think you have enough grit to sell a copier, honey? And I was like, well, this past summer, I shaved several hundred inmates' groins before they had heart catheterization.
Speak up a little bit. I don't think they have you in the back.
I never tell the story.
I told you, gentlemen, you like this. Okay, go ahead.
So my previous internship was doing heart catheterization, which is femoral artery. And there was a very large prison population at the hospital I worked at. And of course you can't, as an intern, work on most people, but there are some gray areas with the incarcerated folks. And so my job was shaving their groins before surgery. And I was pretty cool about it until the serial rapist grabbed my wrist and told me that I was very pretty. And so having told that story to dear Steve, he looked at me and said, if you can do that, you can have the job.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. And before I start taking questions, I just want to throw a quote out there that I really liked that Danielle had come up with. And I think it's in your book, is it?
Yes, I have quotes on the front of each chapter.
She
I love
does.
quotes.
And the one that I really liked was never wish for it more than you work for it. Would you agree? Yeah. All right. Thanks, Danielle. All right, you must have questions. You've got to, even if it's about the groins. You've got to be asking.
My mom didn't know that
Tell
story
me
until
more.
it was in the Washington Post.
So your family found out about it in the press?
Yeah.
Nice.
Books.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody want to ask Danielle anything? Yes.
So when you started your company, you were pharma sales rep, right?
I sold cancer diagnostic equipment to pathology departments, yes.
So did you think your company was going to be a hobby while you still made the six-figure income, or you thought your company was going to take off and you will quit your job and make this into a career piece?
The second, I had done a lot of market research, like cobbling it together, looking at census data to see how many women got married. That was pretty easy. There's my 2.3 million. But then figuring out how many changed their names took a lot of digging. And finally, going back to biology, Danielle, I looked through journal articles, and there was a sociology article about the 88% of women changing their name. So I was like, okay, huge renewable market. And then I started doing, calling people that were just been married that I was friends with. I'm like, would you use this? Would you do this? How long did it take you? So I did actually long-term think that this was going to be my next thing, and that's what gave me, and I also had I had a change of leadership right as I was considering the leap, and Patrick Truelich was a truly terrible human being, and that made that decision.
There you go. Somebody's got to push you out of the nest. So is the company still?
Oh, absolutely.
Are you still a part?
Was still CEO.
So you're still CEO. So you still go to work every day.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yes.
So it sounds like you did all that research to help assure that you'd have a market. What about the technology side of it? Because it's all tech-based, right?
Good question.
Yes, it is all text-based, and so I had a conversation after figuring out, okay, this is somewhat viable, and looking at, again, not being from a tech background, I'm like, what's something sort of like what I'm trying to do? Like, let's look at TurboTax. What is that like? Let me buy a seat and figure out how it works. And then take that to somebody who does have a technical background and say, is it possible to ask a series of questions and then use them to determine which forms need to be filled out and then fill them out? And that answer was yes. And so I actually did all of the form coding. So all the text box, all of the radio buttons, all of the HTML, our first really ugly instructions. I did all of the grunt work and then paid to have the database development done for me. So yeah, understanding just enough to explain it to someone with a technical background is how I got to that component taken care of.
And was that the largest expense?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
So you said you were profitable month one.
Yeah.
How did you get the word out, especially at $30 or $60, right? How did you get the word out, especially having the investment on the tech side of things, so that you kind of hit the ground running?
So that's actually one of my favorite happy stories.
Oh, I forgot to ask you about the happy story. Sorry.
Well, everybody wants
Yeah,
more
we're
interested.
interested. I am prison
understand.
stuff. Yeah.
No, so having built minimal viable miss now misses, Google Ads had, I mean, this is a long time ago, just really started to take off. And so I felt comfortable, starting my first ad campaign. And I remember like sitting at my desk, hopefully with a bottle of champagne, I was waiting, and clicked go. And within 30 minutes, Wendy, our first customer, purchased, drank said champagne, and then because I had bootstrapped so tightly, I spent $15,000 total in our launch. Because of that, and with the power of Google Ads and then strategic partnerships tightly thereafter, that is how we went from red to black in 30 days.
And the strategic partnerships, without really having kind of the background membership with it, did you just pitch on the potential of it and the concept?
Exactly, and what I really liked and what made it easier was I was non-competitive. There was no one else doing it, so I was a bolt-on moneymaker.
Yeah.
I felt at the end of the wedding planning process when most planning sites throw out their lists. One man's trash is another woman's treasure.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they could make money on what was a dead list and that I gave some very generous revenue shares at the beginning is how I got my foot in the door.
Yes, sir.
You bootstrapped, and that's fantastic. You don't need people like me. But only 7% of venture investors out there are women. And
Up from 2.
yeah. And talking to my son in college studying computers, the number of women who are in any technical field, be it computers, engineering, you name it, is so low. And it's, actually from my perspective as an investor, it's very frustrating. You'd love to see balance. You'd love to see women come to the forefront. What do you think's got to happen recognizing men and women are different?
Actually, no. Actually had a couple really interesting conversations lately about what we were just talking about, and the data was a little different than perhaps what your son was experiencing. The numbers of women with engineering, mathematics, and science degrees are actually pretty solid. It's not quite 50-50, but it's a lot higher than you would think. It's once women enter the workforce, they don't stay. Mm-hmm. So we have a pipeline coming in and a hole in the funnel. And stopping the hole is what a colleague of mine is working on. And a lot of it has to do with like being valued, team, et cetera, which sounds very soft skill. She is not a soft skilled person. So there's a lot of data being crunched into it. But I think the fact that all of a sudden they're making, I always worried about Barbie because she upsets me, but they're making Barbies now of Amelia Earhart and of the women who helped launch the first space shuttle. The fact that we're starting to see in the media finally, like you need something to aspire to have, the chutzpah to get past a lot of things. So that sounds like a top-down, bottom-up approach, but I think mentorship. I think I had never heard of entrepreneurship through college. Like that sounds so sad. I mean, I went to liberal arts school, but I had never really thought about who built businesses. I had never been exposed to women in business. So I think having women come in to, not preschool, I was probably a little young, write the books for preschool, but then start coming into the curriculum. Well, I wrote E's for Entrepreneur, and nobody's picked it up yet, but we'll get there. But I think having exposure early on to successful women and having a mentorship where when things get difficult, they have someone to talk to would be a help.
I just wanted to piggyback on that. I mean, you'd be surprised if you look at this community, what we're doing in mentorship applications for women. And I agree with you 100%. I always say that it is the mentorship is the bridge between recruitment and retention. because women walk into the job, the workforce, the classroom, and nobody looks like them. And it's really important to help them sustain that interest.
Did you have a question, Shannon?
Yes. So as a potential customer, I'm getting married in September. Right? I think this is an awesome idea because I've been haunted by the idea of having a change. So can you just briefly explain the process, like, because I'm thinking about professional certifications I had, like, so does it entail getting all of that?
It's exactly like TurboTax. So, you know, your social security card, your passport, postal service, your driver's license, voter registration, those are all set forms, federal or federal, state or state, depending on your state. We serve all of those to you based on, you select your address. As you get into more specific things, we do have notification letters for banks, credit cards, insurances, mortgage providers, professional licenses, and use APIs. We have about 16 million companies and boards that we are able to ping to give you the information you need to submit that notification letter. So,
And can I just add, they take it actually one step further, and they give you the instructions of, this is what you need to do with it. So they give you the form completely filled out with the information, and then very clean instructions of, this is what you need to do with it, this is where you mail it, this is how you package it up. Like,
if you don't want to talk to us, here's the 800 number and all the prompts to go to a human at that office.
Nice.
That's my personal favorite. Because anyone could do it themselves, it's just terrible.
Right.
And so it needs to be a service, and that's how we add that extra.
Jen? Great service. Yes.
So I'm kind of at that point of transitioning from a one-person thing to a team, and I'd love to hear you talk about kind of who your first hires were and how you made that transition
that was
from.
my question, where you started as well.
Yeah,
and how
so I
you
started
were-
as the office of one.
Yeah.
I had, because I bootstrapped, no budget for other staff members. So my first assistant was a hamster. To keep me company, I went from calling on all these hospitals to being by myself all day long. And so beep beep worked for sunflower seeds and was economical. That's funny, but it's true life. When I got to a point where all I did was answer email and phone calls and could no longer work on anything growth related, I probably waited too long. That is when I did my first hire. And I did a terrible job. I hired my husband's friend's wife, who I then had to fire a couple years later when she was pregnant, making me one of the worst people on earth. And so avoid that. I think there are a lot more resources now being plugged into women entrepreneurship networks, any kind of network, and being able to say, hey, I'm looking for somebody. Starting with interns is really nice, or retirees, people that are willing to work part-time that don't necessarily need health care are a great way to sort of bridge your gap and figure out what you like and what you don't like and what you need and what you don't need. I also found making a Google list of what you do in a day for 7 days and seeing where the redundancies are help you understand what you need somebody to do the most.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
How many?
How many?
10 or lean.
10? Very good. Lean is good. Yes, we have enough time for about one or two more, yes.
Okay. And kind of I don't know, maybe a naive question, but I have 3 daughters. They're all preschool age. And we do have astronaut Barbies, and I try my best to sort of give them that. My question is about like the mentorship with young women entrepreneurs. You know, what I would think maybe my daughter's in a couple years, not at 5. Is it that you think the mentorship community historically was male dominated, or is it necessarily because it was male dominated, or there was no attention given to females? Because as a female entrepreneur, if you had a mentor who was a guy, you know, or is it just they weren't paying attention? Is it like you're looking for a female mentor, or just attention from a mentor?
Question. I think I've had friends who have male mentors that have been incredibly helpful to them. So I'm not saying it must be a woman mentor, but there is something to be said for an aspiration. Like, you know, a couple of my mentors, I was like, I really don't want to be a balding, aging, like 80-year-old guy, no matter how smart he is. Like, we don't have the same life, and we don't have the same overlaps. We have a lot of things that I can learn, but having women to not only support but to aspire to sort of spans that back. So any mentor is good, and I don't think you should have just one. I think you need them for various facets of your life and of your business. But yeah, finding for your daughters eventually a community that they can join, or girls who code, find other
I was
friends.
gonna say, yeah, this is what my
Friends
sister
that are
did
like that.
with my niece.
There are a
They
lot
have
of really
STEM
cool
camps.
Yeah,
And
I've
she
already
did
been,
everything early.
believe me, I'm already
That's
researching
awesome.
that.
We're almost out of time, Brian. I know you had, is it a quick question?
Quick question.
Okay.
I think.
Uh-oh.
We'll see. My question's quick, depends on the answer.
I'll be quick.
So, looking back when you first launched, started, clearly did your homework, product research, market research. When you look back now, was there any unexpected lesson learned, roadblock? Where did you need to pivot? What did you learn from that?
The lawsuits, like the copycat competitors, was not, it sounds very dumb, was not something I was prepared for, and really, pushed us off the rails growth-wise for 2 years because all funds went to fighting.
Kind of turned out to be a gift though in the end.
It did,
didn't it?
absolutely. Those things take time to say, but yes, now. At the time, that took years. I should have gone to therapy. I will think on it, and at the end, loop back for you. I know we have a whole.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do we have enough time for one more?
Last one.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Where are you going to be in 5 years?
Well, I'm working on my second book. Somebody asked me this, and there were cocktails involved, and I said I wanted to be the Mother Teresa of women entrepreneurs. So perhaps I will be somewhere amazing, helping communities of women entrepreneurs not only change their communities, but their global economy.
Danielle, thank you. You're amazing.
Sorry.
Please come up. Ellen is going to lead the panel discussion of 3 very esteemed female founders and female influencers to continue the discussion about women in entrepreneurship and women in business. Ellen?
Thanks. So everybody come on up, grab a
Oh,
chair,
wait a minute.
everybody.
Yeah.
What?
No, come on up, come on up.
I think we got enough, all right. I know, is it, wow. Is it okay?
Yes,
It
this
looks
is
like
fine.
you're gonna eject.
I know, I'm gonna,
Don't lean
I'll
forward.
catapult myself into the audience.
Goodness.
It's a whole different
So
ball
really-
game from there.
Yeah?
Yes.
And we all got the dress code.
We did.
Yes.
We
Yes.
did.
Absolutely.
See how we are in sync already as women entrepreneurs.
There
This
you
is
go.
without a memo.
Totally. So, thanks everybody. This is a conversation. Again, a little bit like with Danielle, just we'll talk and then please leap in if you have questions. We've gathered women entrepreneurs from really 3, now 4 different settings, right? These are very different businesses and models. And we want to talk about the challenges and the opportunities that are involved with being a female business owner. And we want to explore how each of you came to be in business and who helped you, and your thoughts about lessons learned that for women especially, but for women and men, because some things just transcend gender. So I'd love to start. We'll start with you, Shannon. I'll give a brief biography, and then I'm going to ask each of you to fill in, as I will call it, the prequel, right? So their bios are all about their owning their business and how great the businesses are, but I want to know what happened beforehand. So Shannon Tate, right here to my left. Shannon is in the, can we call you a solopreneur?
Yes.
Is that the right word?
That
I'm
is
learning this
correct.
word. Founder and CEO of Deep Roots Consulting, which is providing life coaching, consulting, facilitation, and training, and also, not to be outdone, she's also president and CEO of the May Be Foundation, which is a community-based nonprofit, and it's changing lives of African American students who have lost a parent or a guardian by providing emotional and financial resources. So very cool, Shannon Beasley Tate. Okay, then Suzanne Magee comes from a different place, totally. And is it Bandura? Is that the right way to say
Yes,
the company?
Bandura.
Okay, so I'm learning that one too. Suzanne is the co-founder, chief evangelist officer of Bandura LLC, which is a security software company, and also chair of TechGuard Security, which is a U.S. critical infrastructure security and national cyber defense Enterprise. And some of you know what that means.
We're talking Russia.
I know. In 2013, Suzanne established Bandura, a wholly owned subsidiary of TechGuard, to commercialize the polywall technology with associated 50 patents issued or pending, positioning for the growing global security software market. So welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you.
And then Danielle, we've met. And then Wendy Baird. Wendy is president and creative director of Insight 180, which is a branding agency for B2B advisory businesses. She's been advising companies on branding, positioning strategy, no, named development, identity, messaging, design, and marketing for more than 25 years. And your business has been in Ellicott City for all
18
of
of those.
Yeah. Awesome. Wendy is a survivor of the Ellicott City floods.
Yes.
So,
Oh my
yes.
God.
Yes. Yeah, more power to you. So I'd love for you to start and just talk a little bit about what led you into your consulting company. Just give us a little idea of what led you to this place in your life where you're at.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and I'm excited to be here. I think I'm on the other end of the spectrum from Danielle and excited about being a solopreneur. I think that as women, sometimes we want to be as big as Oprah. I've envisioned myself on stage or being interviewed by Oprah, just probably like anyone else in the room. But at the same time, I've had situations in my life that made me go, okay, why am I starting a business again? I have a great career, which is my full-time job in the federal government. I work in substance abuse and mental health, and if you've watched anything on television, the opioid crisis has taken over everything. But I've considered myself a grassroots bureaucrat. And I think that kind of came together for me because there was a lot that I could do as a federal employee, but then there were other things that I couldn't do. And I couldn't do the life coaching skills. I had people coming to me for advice all the time about how do I get from that sticky floor situation to moving myself from being stuck and being paralyzed. And so I was like tired of giving that advice away for free and decided to kind of build upon that. And I think it really started for me back in 2014, and my mother had passed away a year or so before that, and I was really in a period of grief and loss and trying to figure out how do I reinvent myself. I was in the middle of a marriage that was really fledgling at the time and ultimately ended, so I was too scared to really leave my full-time job, not having the support of another income to help me take care of my two children, which at the time were preteens. They're teenagers now, so 2 teenage girls in the house, that's really fun. It's a job within itself. And I think that I wanted to have something to help other people that may be grieving from any type of loss, whether it was the loss of a job, loss of any type of relationship, loss of a parent like I did, and I felt like it was a place for me to really expand on the substance abuse and mental health background that I have and counseling background that I have to help others. And so I really started the business, which our motto is to dig, cultivate, and grow. And I wanted to help people individually and organizations as well to really dig behind an issue of why they're feeling stuck, why they're feeling they can't move forward, and then take those things and cultivate some new opportunities, some new ideas. I'm a really resourceful person, so I wanted to take the partnerships and the people that I knew in the community that could help move them forward so that they could grow. So that's really what the premise was behind the business. And so from there, I generated a lot of clients individually, but also in businesses and with faith-based organizations, and would start just hearing more stories about people's loss. And so that really catapulted me into writing my own book called Get Your Head in the Game, Life Lessons Learned from My Mother Through the Game of Basketball. And so I built on not only what I was doing in the business, but taking the grief and loss that I experienced and really transforming that into a way to marry and metaphorically talk about my mom playing basketball, I played, my daughters play, and talk about those lessons that I learned from her being a coach for me, and also using that in my coaching business and helping people with those life lessons. But as usual, I couldn't stop there because I apparently have more hours in the day than an average person. And I was just getting such big generated interest in what the book was about and what leaving a life of legacy was. And since my mother passed away 2 weeks after her 69th birthday, I was like, you know, there's a lot of life that we all have to live. And so I wanted to talk more about how to help others. And I felt like an orphan at 40 when my parents were both gone at that point. So I really wanted to take that and go into developing the Maybe Foundation, which just started this past year, and I'm really excited about this nonprofit. Never ventured into being someone who wanted to do a nonprofit, didn't understand anything about that world, but I felt like there was a gap and a hole that I could help fill and give back, and this is my way to be able to do that. And Maybe actually stands for my mother's initials, Mabel Alice Young Beasley. And I felt like if you could maybe help someone move from point A to point B, if you could maybe support someone and give them the help that they need, that they would have success. So that's generally how I started all of these ventures that I've started.
I think she's gonna be on Oprah. Sorry. I know someone in the audience that was on Oprah. Connection.
Yes.
Not pointing, but yeah, it's working.
Yes.
Suzanne, how about you? I know that you've got quite a story that predates Bandura. So.
Boy, I can relate to so many of the stories that we've already heard today, but mine starts probably when I was 2. And my parents, my dad loves to tell this story. I don't know that it's that flattering, but I would not stay home. He was an intern in a medical program. He's a guy, he got in. And he, so we were living in campus housing, and he said I would just go out door to door and just ring the doorbell and talk to people, and they never knew where I was. So I think I'm a natural cold caller. So, you know, you just gotta go with it, right? So I've always been, I guess, an extrovert. So anyway, that has served me well. I will say that with my first technology business, I ended up by dumb luck with someone who was exact opposite of me, and that was the beauty. So we were completely opposite. We used to say we were yin and yang. She's an introverted engineer, and I'm just an extroverted, cold calling kind of person out there with some science background. So anyway, so from there, I did a variety of things. I did an entrepreneurial college route and just couldn't center on one particular thing. All that later served me well. I studied communications, I studied biology, I studied advertising at one point. So really, as I got older and then finally decided to go into the tech area and be an entrepreneur, I could really draw on a lot of this kind of entrepreneurial education that I'd had before there was any real entrepreneurial support. And I'm really a senior citizen here, so I have a 2-year-old grandson and my children are grown, so now, and I'm divorced. So I am actually free to be the entrepreneurial workaholic that I love. So I am totally loving this, and really, it's great. So I started out in the tech area, got divorced from my husband after putting him through medical school, and our dream was, I was staying home, and really together we had all these plans. And all of a sudden, his nurse was far more interesting than my wanting help with bathing children. You know, I'm sure it's a two-way street there, but for whatever reasons, he decided that that would be a better path for him. And so now I'm going, okay, now what am I going to do? So I guess I was in my early 40s and decided I'm going to go back to school. I got into technology. And then I took my first job working for somebody else in the late 90s, and then told that group, it was a small entrepreneurial company, they were putting websites up in 1998, 99, and they were going to take credit cards, and I found out about a security organization, some of you know cybersecurity, it's called SANS, and they do a lot of training now, and it's world renowned. I found out about it, and I found that, you know what, we need to think about the security that we're doing, and that was in 1999. So early 2000, they had no interest in that, and I said, I'm going to go start a company
And they said, well, good luck. I said, well, I want you to know because I'm going to leave you and I'm going to do cybersecurity. It was called network security then. And they said, good luck. And I said, I'll see you at the top. So those are my party words. So anyway, I went down into my basement and I did all the wrong things. I quit my job and then I went to apply for a loan. They don't give loans to people who are unemployed. So that didn't work very well. So that was in the year 2000. So really learning from the SANS organization that there was a call from the White House to secure the critical infrastructure of the United States. And it was going to take a public-private partnership to do that. That most of these infrastructures, you're talking the financial systems, the healthcare system, even things that operate agriculture and our utilities, and our military now more and more on all functioning and controlled by the internet. So we need to work together with ideas because the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines are not going to be able to secure us. We're still struggling a bit out there. So I said, you know what? I'm going to found a security company with that mission. And that company is TechGuard Security, and that company exists today and is growing. I'm the chairman of that company. We developed some technology in part with the Department of Defense, and we spun that out to bring it to the commercial sector in Bandura. And I was the chairman of that. I brought another woman into the CEO position at TechGuard. This last year, we just got a bench that team gave to all the executives, and it said, when women support women, amazing things can happen. So that was just really a surprise. It wasn't that intentional, but anyway. So then spun out Bandura, and now we are bringing that technology, which is a firewall's firewall. So firewalls were never designed thinking that a refrigerator could attack a network. Right? Everything has an IP address. Your Nest, all these things, and they can be harnessed by the bad guys to launch attacks at networks. So there is only about 3% of known threats that a firewall can handle. So this huge problem exists. That's our niche. We filter all that stuff out in front of a firewall, and it's starting to take off. So really excited about that. So that's my story. A lot of failures along the way.
We're going to hear more. Wendy, how about you?
Sure. So I still haven't decided what I want to be when I grow up, but I always wanted to be a singer, and I am still on the side. But I started in nonprofit work, and I was a salesperson, and I did all kinds of things. I majored in communications, but had a music scholarship, a voice scholarship, go figure, and took every art class I could. It turned out that communications and art turned me into somewhat of a graphic designer. And I did sales. I'm definitely an extrovert, love to talk to people, and I think that's probably what's helped me grow my business. But 25 or so years ago, I decided that I wanted to have a child, and I quit my job, and I started a business. But the thing is, I had a second income to fall back on. I was married at the time. And also, the work that I had been doing, I worked for a place called Downtown Partnership of Baltimore, which is still around, and actually we still do a lot of their graphics now, but I was their PR and marketing director. And because I was doing a lot of graphic design work and communications work through that job, the companies that were involved in this quasi-public partnership called and said, who does your newsletter? Who does this? And it's like, oh, well, I do. And yeah, I could do some freelance. So I did have some freelance clients before I started, so I wasn't completely stupid. But then I got a part-time job with a landscape company doing their PR and marketing while I started my business. And it took off. And that was about 8 years where I was working out of my house, and I had a part-time employee. And then I found a partner, similarly, someone who was exactly the opposite. Like it was like we made a whole person, we said. She was very, it was great because I really needed someone to rein me in sometimes. I tend to be the big person, idea person, talk to people, figure out what their vision is, bring it back to the office. Well, she was the one who said, whoa, wait. And she would go linear on me, and she would figure out the process to make it all work. So our titles, we thought we were so cute back then. Our titles were, I was principal and possibility, and she was principal and practicality. And then, like all good marriages, ours ended in divorce. No. So I bought out my partner in 2015. She wanted out, and it was time, and it was clear. So not fun. We as against the, I highly recommend everybody have a really great written agreement. You know, we're thinking 2 women will get along. It'll be fine, no problem. Ooh, it was hard. It was probably tougher than my divorce, really. But great things came from it. And even with the flooding in Ellicott City, I have a team of 5 now, and we do brand consulting and design. It turned out that we were doing a lot of graphics, but we learned this thing called branding because we had a lot of startups or companies that had been around for 2 or 3 years come to us, and they didn't know what even their positioning should be in their business. So we found that we were actually doing a ton of consulting, asking those deep questions about, well, you know, what are your core values? And, you know, we were probably in the early side, one of the businesses that was all about authenticity. It's like, why do you want to look like someone else? Let's be you guys. If you guys wear jeans to the office, don't have a website that shows suits and ties. So we developed a process that we call the 180 positioning process, and we help brand and rebrand companies that have been around for a while. We rename them, we position them, we do their websites, we do their logos, we sometimes do their social media and blogs if we know enough about them.
That's great. So that leads me to ask a question. You know, we've talked a lot about the challenges of starting a business, period. What makes women entrepreneurs different? Can you zero in, any of you, on the things that you feel make you different from your counterpart who might be a guy who started this business?
I'll take a stab at that. I think as a woman of color and an African American woman in business, I think I've always seen women run businesses in some way, whether it was in their kitchen, in their basement, selling pies, selling cakes, babysitting someone's child and end up having 10 in there. I think that it's just what I've seen in the community. But I think what makes it different is how you take something from your kitchen and believe that you can grow beyond that into a bigger business. So I think that that can be a challenge for women, and a lot of times women of color, because then it's maybe you don't. Even when I was married, I was the breadwinner. And so feeling like how you balance, how you take money out of your own personal nest egg to grow your business when you've got to feed children and got to take care of the household, and then ultimately divorcing as well, and now really feeling like, how do I grow this if I'm not able to get a loan? Sometimes that may be a little more difficult. Have a great credit score, but it doesn't mean anything if people make determination just based on how you may look that you're not a good risk to take this type of loan on. So I think that sometimes those are the challenges that you have to overcome in business just to even start out and grow.
I think it's better today, but I was going to say, I think that I remember 20 years ago where I would meet with someone and, you know, you might get a, oh, well, so how, you know, tell me about your business. Like, it's a cute little thing. They wouldn't always be taken seriously, or you're too pretty to run a business, or whatever. And, you know, even in the last couple months, I remember going into a business setting, was the only woman there, and I met most of the people, few better than others, and so there's a few people who I know them very well, I can give them a hug. Some people I'm we handshake, it's a handshake. Some men are still, oh, hi. I can't stand that. Shake the hand, men, shake the hand. So that stuff still exists, and it's kind of frustrating. But that said, I think we are fabulous nurturers, and that's one of the reasons why we're in business, and it's why we do what we do, because we want to also impact other people.
I think we listen very well to end user, to customer,
to team, etc. And it's a soft skill. But when you don't listen, you create the product or company that you want, not necessarily the one that the market wants. So I think in my experience, I've seen women do, well, guys listen also, I've seen women do a better job of it overall.
What do you think, Suzanne?
Well, I think one of the things that you had said, Danielle, that as a mother, you will do anything for that child. Because I'll tell you the kinds of challenges that we had. I don't know, when we started our security company, there were a lot of tech companies just coming off that dot boom. There were like 400 and some in St. Louis where we were. 400 and some tech companies. Only 2 survived. We were one of them. It's unbelievable to even think about that. People say, how do you do that? And I'm like a dog with a bone. I mean, I was just like, I'll find a way to do it. The other was, I was really left in a situation after my divorce where it was, well, the creditors will be at your door. And I realized if I really want this legacy that I thought I was creating together, because I'm a very family-oriented person, with my husband, it was me. It wasn't just a job. I needed to create all the legacy, dreams, and future for my children. And that just gave me all kinds of tenacity. The other thing is, I'm a tent camper, and I thank my parents for that. So if you have a tent and you're willing to sleep in it, you'll never have a problem being an entrepreneur. That's right, nothing will scare you. Nothing will scare you. So I think for women, we sometimes are experiencing just more of those kinds of struggles, and it's made us, maybe not genetically, but maybe we are more of a multitasker. You're home, you're doing the finances, the schooling for your children, you're helping maybe spouses with careers, and maybe this is a little dated, because I am, but you know, it still is. When you do all of that, you bring all those skills to entrepreneurship, and you need them all. So that might be why women are, you know, why we might be a little better positioned through some struggles.
Yes. Are the rules different for women? I mean, and you've been in business for a while. Do you notice that they're different, whether it's for funding or for vendors or for your customers? What do you see?
I'll just jump in on the funding, because with Bandura we are out raising money and then we're going for the bigger round of funding. It's very different. So just the way that we communicate, sometimes if you're in a room full of men, and usually that is who you're presenting to, if you're trying to get big venture capital, it's changing and that's helpful. But some of them think, you sound like my wife, or you remind me, your pitch of your voice is irritating. Or, and I just see some of them shut down. It's really true. You really want to do business with people who are kind of like you, and you think they are like you, speak your language. So that's been really challenging. It's raising the bigger funding. And now I'm the CEO, Chief Evangelist Officer, because it is a small percentage of women in technology that get the venture funding. And I knew I need to quickly, I have a really hot market, I got to get to the next level. So I hired an experienced CEO in tech, a guy who's raised a lot of money before, and so he can pick up the phone and get that kind of attention. But he said, Suzanne, I would not take this job if you don't stay on the executive management team. And so he's a wonderful partner. So anyway, and I'm learning. I know I could do it, but I don't have time right now. So it's just too dicey for me to really do that for all the stakeholders I have. But I'm going to do it next time. Absolutely, I am. That's a challenge, I think. Yep.
Danielle, did you have an idea?
I will say the rules are different. I love men. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm happily married and have a little boy at home, who's my favorite startup. But a strong woman has to be incredibly careful about how she articulates and presents herself.
That's right.
Because if I walked in heels and a dress and addressed a room and said, this is what we're doing, here's how we're getting there, this is the goal, do it. I am not a strong leader, I'm a bitch. and that's sad.
Still
So
true,
the
yeah.
calculations that go in to pitching, to partnerships, to all those things take time and effort. And that's okay because that's where it is. I think it's getting better and better. But if you think about the time you spend crafting things and polishing things, if you didn't have to use that time and energy in that way, you could be doing other things. So that's why the rules are slightly different, but they are getting better.
Wendy, have you run into that with customers or with
Oh, sure.
vendors?
I mean,
something like that?
yeah, sure. Yes.
You know what, I don't have my own story, but I have a much better one. A friend of mine had the most successful software IPO of history. And she was in the office for that deal to be brokered. And she's co-founder with her husband. And he was doing something, and so a couple of people came in and asked her to pour coffee because they assumed that she was the secretary. So,
Did she?
yes, after she informed them who she was, because she's very gracious.
I mean, no, I won't say that.
I think the other is in technology an assumption that you really don't understand technology. I still have some of my engineers in the lab. They really dumb it down to be sure I'm gonna understand. I mean, really, it's just interesting. It's just a perception, and it is it just makes it harder. So I think that's part of it too. And I think, as you said, you want to be gracious. You also want to try to meet people on a level, and you need to bring them in. So you don't want people to feel like they're on the outside. So that's one of the things we need to be careful as women. You know, we can build support networks. It's fantastic. We can have each other's back. Springboard, if you've never heard of it, fabulous. That's their mantra. We've got your back. And they, you know, it's for you want to get out there and raise some big capital. But at the same time, you have to remember that you have to understand where others are coming from too and their communication styles. So I think that's really important, and to embrace and keep them in. Don't create stuff that's on the outside. That doesn't work.
How do you, with all that, that probably every woman in this room has experienced, how do you make sure that you are on the radar of people, and how do you navigate that? And what should people watch out for in order to know if they're hitting in a good way, or if they're starting to come across in a way that maybe isn't as positive? What do you watch for?
I think for me, it's about referrals. I think that if my referrals start to slow down, then I'm going, did I make somebody upset? You know, what am I not doing? Am I not fresh? Am I not staying on top of what's going on out there? And I think when I know I am hitting the mark, I definitely am getting the clients in the door. I'm able to really get out there and market myself in a different way. So I think that's really important to kind of stay in tune to what your numbers are looking like and how that's going for you on a monthly basis for me.
Yeah, that's right. It's all about the numbers. I think also you're going to need mentoring groups and mentors that you are in an advisory board maybe that doesn't just tell you what you want to hear. You don't want just, you know, somebody that was a friends and family investor who thinks you're just great, just keep doing what you're doing. No, you need the person to say, what are you doing? Why aren't you looking at this market? Or why aren't you doing something over here? So I think that's another way to just kind of check in. And I wish I'd used an advisory board that was a little more challenging right from the get-go. I used to not tell my advisory board things because I didn't want them to think poorly of me as a woman leader when they could have answered my questions or helped solve my problems.
That's right.
Right? So now I look for challenging people that are really good. You need support, but that's what I would say. Don't be afraid of that.
I've had some great luck too, even with other business advisory boards of folks who are running businesses, and it's more like a mastermind kind of thing. I also have a business coach that I love.
That's great.
She holds me accountable.
Yeah.
So how'd that go from last time? It's like, better have my work done, right? Yeah.
that's one of the things that a lot of people talk about is capacity building. So how can women here or anywhere work together? And obviously there's good groups out there for mentoring, and there's places like Maryland Center for Entrepreneurship. Did any group particularly help any of you in connecting?
For years, I was on a tab board. It's called the Alternative Board. It's kind of like a Vistage. That was great. I would also say, so Shannon and I were both part of Leadership Howard County, a great program here. If you want to get to learn how your government works, businesses, we learned about the importance of being on nonprofits. She started a nonprofit. I've been on a couple nonprofit boards. I'm gonna put a little plug in. I'm part of the Conscious Capitalism of Howard County. We started a chapter, and there's cards back there if anyone's interested. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, and particularly women entrepreneurs, you need one of these because you're one, are conscious capitalists, and they don't even know it. It's definitely people who want to give back. It's people, planet, profits. There's 4 tenets of it's not just about stakeholders, it's about shareholders and community. So it's a really great movement. I find that I'm more in tune, or I tend to attract, I think, some conscious capitalists as clients. So I enjoy it very much. And we've got a couple board members here. Raise your hand. Evan Reitmeyer, yay. But it's a great group, and we were on kind of hiatus for a while, and now we're starting up again. But I think serving on boards and nonprofits, I was part of the Howard Tech Council. I was on the board, and I'm an advisory business, and of course I use technology, but what was really interesting, I think that I was part of the effort to recruit more women and to recruit more people of color. And it's like, we need representation everywhere. And I think that's how we can help when we serve on boards and things like that.
I'll say ditto. I did the exact same thing. Someone told me that long ago, just to get engaged and do some sort of voluntary board position in the community. And if you really look at large, maybe Fortune 500, even Fortune 50 companies, who's on the United Way board? They're all on each other's boards. This is how business is done. And they network by being in this kind of voluntary kind of positions. But then you will also learn how a board runs, what makes a good board, and when you need your board, you'll know how to do it, and you'll know how to do your presentations and what you need for your board. But I tell you, there's nothing like it. You do something for someone else's charity or what they're doing in the nonprofit world, and you've got instant people that want to help you. Just like what you said, I guess with Trouble. That's a great example. And you're so glad because now we can use Trouble and help another entrepreneur actually who's going to help us. And that is what it's all about. So I would highly recommend you get engaged in that way. But also NABO, National Association of Women Business Owners, really helped me a lot. I became the public policy chair. Now, my first company does almost all government contracting. I don't come from the military. Arguably, maybe I was even like a hippie at one point. Somebody might say. But really, I think it's that kind of organization gave me the opportunity to say, I'll go and how do you brief congressmen and senators? I did it locally at the state level, and then I did it in Washington when I started TechGuard Security. I couldn't afford a plane ticket at that point, but we drove to DC and we briefed our legislators because we were starting something really important with a mission to help the United States critical infrastructure. And I knew how to do that because I volunteered for NABO, and then I eventually learned how to do public policy stuff. So it all connects. All those dots connect, and it's just really important. So they helped me a lot.
It sounds like all of you, whether through circumstance or some voluntary choice, kind of moved outside of your comfort zone in order to actually do this. Sometimes we
totally
do it because we know to do it, and sometimes we get shoved. But I'm interested, Shannon, you talked a lot about, is this a leap of faith, and how can women who may already be working full time, is there a way to navigate this, either to just give it up and go or to try to straddle that?
I think you have to do a good cost-benefit analysis of making that leap. Everybody, just even here on the panel, has a different story, a different way we've entered our business ventures. But I think that the big understanding of where you are financially, how it will affect your family if you're making this change. I think, of course, putting in a plug for being able to get a coach, like Wendy said, just to be able to talk you through some of those landmines that you want to avoid along the way can really help. What is your fallback plan if things don't go well or go the way that you want them to go? I think all of those things are really helpful. I think for me that it's a slow-moving process to be able to leave the federal government. Like I said, I have 2 teenagers that are going to college soon, and being able to grow my business at the same time. But I think you can do both, and I think that it's just really being able to plug in to some good mentors, to some good people that are on your team that can help you know when it's the right time to make that leap.
Anybody else?
I think women just need to think bigger.
Yes.
And I think that is really, we limit ourselves, exactly what Danielle said originally. It's so true. Even now, I have to check myself. I'm like thinking, am I really worthy? And then I look at some Silicon Valley company. They don't even know half the time what they're doing. They don't care. They'll take your money. They'll go do it. And I want to be sure I'm going to deliver, and I want to be sure everything's just right. So I think that really is true. You got to think about that. And don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to fail. Just
Don't be afraid to speak up. Sometimes I think we're too polite.
there you go.
Yes.
And we don't, we wait and we raise our hand, where a lot of times the guys will just speak out in the
That's
audience.
right.
So I've learned to speak out sometimes, and sorry, I'll apologize later, right? But it's like, I just heard a great interview on NPR with, she's a comedy writer, and she was talking about how she was consulted for Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In book. Did you hear that? She said, what I want to say is the sequel to that is men make room. So it's not just about, yes, women have to be more daring, but men also need to be willing to hire that person, take the woman seriously, make a little room, and it's like Frances McDormand said at in her speech, have that rider. Like, make it happen. If you want more women in tech, then hire people, find them. They're out there. They're out there.
And groom them if they're not quite where you want them to be. People are able to learn,
Right.
they're able to grow, but give people a chance. I think men do a great job of some of that networking kind of out of the boardroom, playing golf, playing different sports, finding out what each other can do. And women aren't in that world as much. And so it's trying to find a way to bring a woman along, knowing that you can benefit from that along the way.
Thank you all. Thank you very much, all of you. And then, are there questions? You have a couple minutes. Yeah, please, go ahead.
What do you do when you walk in a meeting to set the right tone for yourself? I mean, in the meeting room.
I know I go in like I belong there. I think it's like Wendy said, I don't just timidly raise my hand. I firmly take my seat and make the position known that I am comfortable, I do feel worthy, and I belong there. Not that I'm a know-it-all, I'm taking my notes in the corner and figuring out who I need to consult afterwards, but I make my presence known, and I think that that's an important aspect of taking that seat at the table.
I think it would depend, are you the leader of the meeting as a woman, or are you participating in a meeting? As the leader, I think you can be organized with a good agenda and keep it time-bound and keep that meeting moving. Man, you'll get a lot of people, it doesn't matter who they are, that will love you right out of the gate because we didn't let this person hijack the meeting and we kept it on schedule and we accomplished what we said. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's how it's gonna roll. Okay, let's go. I think that can be helpful because it's being respectful of the other people in the room. But otherwise, I'm with you. Make yourself known. If it's new, if I'm new, I go around and introduce myself. I'll give a card, I'll shake a hand, tell people who I am. I will not sit quietly at the table. I'll make sure that, just like you said, that was well said. Great, that's a good point.
And ditto.
I do my research, not just on the topic of the meeting, but LinkedIn is a beautiful place.
Oh, yeah.
And so I look at who is going to be there, not just to know their name and their face, because I have trouble sometimes. I always remember a face, but the names not so much. But also looking like, where do they go to school? What nonprofit? Like, what do we have in common?
Perfect. Shared
Because if you have commonality, then you can come to an agreement on whatever topic it may be. So it makes you much more likable and memorable if you're like, oh, hey, I looked and I noticed that we have this in common, or at least I know your name and who you are.
And some people may not agree, and I guess it depends on the meeting, but I usually end up making people laugh just a little and smile, more comfortable. That's really true.
Do you break into song if you have to?
Oh,
If I have to, only if I have to.
Wine helps, you know, there's all kinds of things that can help a meeting.
Yes, ma'am?
Question for Shannon. So I'm a solopreneur / employee. I'm actually a lieutenant for Baltimore County Fire Department. So I have effectively
You broke
learned
that ceiling, actually.
to navigate the man's world. I think my question is, how do you, because I don't know if you can perfect balance. I'm not sure if there's a such thing as, how do you go into work and continue with the passion of why you took this career, but then, you know, deal with still nurturing and growing your baby at the same time? Like how those days when you leave work and you just want to like strangle everybody in close proximity. But
I think I keep my eye on the prize with that, and I don't know when you get paid, but I get paid every other Friday, and for no other reason than that. I know that that's why I can go into that job and be okay. I also give them everything that I'm supposed to give them in order to do a good job, make sure that I'm handling the responsibilities that I'm supposed to handle, but I'm not pouring all of my eggs in that basket anymore. I give you exactly what you need, and sometimes more. There's weeks I've been traveling a lot for my full-time job lately. But I also go home and make sure I give that same passion and that same time to my business. Sometimes I'm up a little later than I probably should be when I know I need to get up and go to my full-time job every day, but no one else is going to put in those hours for me. And because I love what I do in my personal business, it's what keeps me up at night and keeps me excited. But I think there is no such thing as balance, and anybody who says that there is, they're really lying to you.
Model the behavior that you want your
Yeah.
children to grow up to be. So by being an entrepreneur, my children learned a lot of independence, and both of my daughters are doing quite well. Sometimes I say, don't you need me? You know, a little bit. No, I'm proud of that, but you know, I think that's something else. You don't have to be so self-sacrificial.
Right.
You're going to model the behaviors that you want.
Self-care too.
Absolutely.
Self-care.
You gotta get a massage every once in a while. You have to go sing if you're gonna sing, if that brings you joy. You have to do that every once in a while.
That's so good.
We've got time for one more. Andy, have one?
One more.
Question for everybody on the panel. Have any of you had any experience working with female entrepreneurs that are veterans? And if you have you noticed their skills experience being different from yours?
I'm a female entrepreneur and a veteran.
Yes.
I think I have a lot of veterans that work in the cyber area. They come with their clearances. They're already cyber certified oftentimes. I just find in general there is a respect for authority. There is a lot of discipline that is really helpful. But sometimes I think it's harder for veteran employees. I've had to work with them to say, we're entrepreneurial. You can break that mold, right? So you don't just have to talk to this person above you. No, communicate across the board. So sometimes you have to undo some of that. That's my experience anyway. So, but man, some of that discipline, skills, yeah, I admire that. I wish I'd had a little more of that. Still do. Yeah, it's amazing.
The Conscious Capitalism just had Dog Tag Bakery come and speak, which is a a veteran-owned business who works with veterans to help them become entrepreneurial. Great organization. Check out. Grab one of these. Check it out. This is not my business. This is what I volunteer for. They're in the back.
There you go.
That's perfect.
Yeah, you too, all you guys.
Yes.
So we're at time, so thank you all
Thank
for
you.
Thank
great
you.
conversation.
Appreciate it.
Ellen, thank you so very much for chairing this and for doing it. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up this evening's program.